Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shovel Knight. In the last part we started off the game and now we're heading into Troupple Pond. I know I said truffle last part, but honestly this is one of those words I'm never quite sure. I think even the developers have said it a numerous amount of ways. Who has awakened me? Mortal, dost thou need aid? Aid me! I sent a truffle chalice. I can fill it with magical ichor, that's pronounced ichor. Shit. Choose your ichor wisely. Now here you can get various potions that do different effects, be it healing, temporary invincibility, or just absorbing your treasure. I'll be real, the health restorative is the best one even though I never use it throughout the LP. Subjects, a new initiate joins us. The ceremony shall commence. Fare thee well, Shoveled Knight. Return if thou hast need of my aid again. And you can come here at any point just to get the ichors for free. After you spend, I think it's the 1200 per on the 2 chalices, you can buy them whenever. Also, this is me remembering, I'm used to, at this point, using triangle to use my sub-weapons in this game due to my customizations on the PS4, as well as I think what's by default in King of Cards and Spectre Torment. To use sub-weapons or relics here, in Shovel Knight and Plague of Shadows by default, it's up in the square button like Castlevania. In those, it's just whatever the equivalent to the triangle button is. I believe in this transition here, I ended up going off screen and switching to it. With that said, it's time for our first proper stage, Pridemoor Keep, the lair of King Knight. The first 2 stages you can select in the game between this and the other one, I feel this is the easier one. I almost feel like it's the one they intend for you to take on first due to how its boss and level is structured. Also, there's the golden fish I mentioned last part. Essentially, the fishing rod relic we got. You press whatever setup you have to use your relic, and you send the hook down. If there's a sparkling spot there on the bottomless pits, it'll either be a music note page in a couple of cases for the bard, a golden fish, which is 350 gold, or as we'll see later, a minor, one of the little fish the Truffle King had with him. And they will give you, I think, any of the ichors as long as you have a free chalice. Though I get the chalices filled as soon as I can, and I never use them through the LP because, to be frank, I often forget I have them. Even though they're what makes runs like New Game Plus at times more bearable. More on that later. Although we saw one there, but the first major mechanic of King Knight stage is these, I guess it's supposed to be like molten gold or something, cauldrons. After a set period of time, they will just leak their contents onto the floor, in which case you can just move between them. Very standard, but at the same time, if you're rushing, they can really easily surprise you. Now, as for King Knight's bio, according to the official sources, King Knight isn't a king. He's a king-themed knight. But that doesn't stop him from making decrees. As the Lord Defender of Pridemoor Keep, he commands a formidable army of minions. Experienced with repelling invaders who dare try to topple his malevolent monarchy, King Knight is a master of single combat, and because he's dressed to the nines at almost all times, he's always ready for a brutal coronation. Pros, he has a commanding presence, charismatic, and is a snappy dresser. Cons, again, not actually a king. And this is the first time you get to see a very minor mechanic the game has that's basically useless. Shovel Knight can duck, but it's less so a duck because he's already so short as it is, bending his knees. You duck down, I think it's like the equivalent of 1 or 2 pixels. It's not much. It can make a difference, but it's seldom used. Now, you saw there, I attacked the checkpoint. The checkpoints in most stages look different than they did in the plains. The one in the plains are unbreakable checkpoints, but almost every checkpoint moving forward is not going to have like the gilded wings along their edges, because you can break them. I think it takes 3 strikes, and a gem equivalent to the value shown within, as well as some minor gems will show up around that, at the cost of losing that checkpoint throughout the rest of the run of that level. So in the case, for instance, I broke that previous checkpoint, I would go back to the start of the level if I died prior to that checkpoint. With that said, you can get some pretty good money out of some of the later checkpoints in the game because they intentionally make the checkpoints more valuable, not only the farther you get into the game period, but also depending on the amount of time and space there is between that checkpoint and the previous one, in my experience. And there is an achievement to break every single checkpoint in the game. One of the reasons I have bad memories of doing so is because I did that, Deathless Run, and New Game Plus all at once. More again on that later. Time for Chester again. In the village around the field, I have all the deals. You're not gonna believe what I just found in this chest. Wanna see? We can buy a flare wand here, conjures up fiery blasts. It's a wand that shoots fireballs. Watch your magic meter. So you press the triangle button, you fire a fireball forward that travels straight until it hits something. Pretty self-explanatory, honestly. Every single major level in the game has another relic for us to find. However, in every chest we find, Chester has already beaten us to it, and we need to buy it from him. This is why it's important to have a little bit of money if you go into every level, and make sure you get as much money as you can throughout it. Usually I'd say Chester's found at around the 3rd to halfway point, though I think that varies a little bit depending. And it is notable, you should definitely buy each relic from Chester in the level, as while you can buy the relic that you can find in every level from Chester back in the first village, it costs more to buy it from him at the village than it does in the level. I think in most cases it's an increase of at least 500 gold. So make sure you're buying it while you can. The flare wand, it's alright. It's good for hitting enemies from a distance and if you have a very straight shot to them. But I'd honestly argue again that the best sub-weapon for taking out enemies, especially ones that are straight in front of you, is just the Chaos Sphere you can get in the first village. Also, treasure chests in this game are a bit odd. Sometimes they'll just contain 2 different values of money, either a little bit or a lot, or a music note, or I think at least one occasion, bombs. We'll start seeing bombs later on in this level. Essentially, whenever you dig up a dirt pile or break open one of the serving dishes that usually have like the turkeys on it or the apples to recover your health, there will sometimes just be bombs there to try and get you with the gotcha attack. Sometimes chests will contain that, but it's not often, although I think it is more often on New Game Plus, because New Game Plus does change not only some damage values, but also where certain things are and the frequency of how you get so many items. I'm going to be saving New Game Plus for when I'm running out of things to talk about, in particular because there's a lot to talk about with New Game Plus, surprisingly, especially in terms of strategies for boss fights, especially if you're trying to do the game deathless. This level also gives you a good point of view on how to find secrets throughout the rest of the game, because sometimes there's enemies you need to pogo up in sequence in order to reach screens you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise. Sometimes there might be hidden areas above the screen in order to jump up and reach other areas, and sometimes there's just secrets hidden next to each other like that. Thankfully, though, in terms of getting 100%, Shovel Knight doesn't count on you to find every single secret in the game, every single hidden treasure trove, for instance. It just wants you to find all the music notes, all of the sub-weapons, and all of the bosses, technically. Because there are some hidden bosses, though they're never hidden in actual stages. And even then, I believe the relics, in the case you miss where they are on the level, Chester will actively have them back in the first village. So you're never really out of luck for finding stuff, you just might have to be out of luck in terms of the amount of money you have to buy them. Also, another mechanic this stage has is these chandeliers. If you get below them or stand on them, they fall. Pridemoor Keep arguably has the most box standard mechanics, so to speak. But I'd say every level has one or two that's like, oh, we got this standard platforming convention, but then we got something a little more unique as we progress through. In fact, we're coming up on that for this stage in a moment. Also, the game occasionally will put dirt piles on walls, and whenever you strike them, they just become an orb you need to step on, or pogo on, rather, in order to break. Usually they're not really worth it, though, in terms of their output. Right here is... Actually, no, first off, I'm going to come over here for a music note. The music notes found in stages usually rely on either a harder version of the level's mechanics to grab, or just some really perilous platforming otherwise. usually over a lot of bottomless pits, because this game loves them. Not as much as certain other platformers, but there's definitely a distinct difficulty curve in Shovel Knight, as the first 2 knights you fight are going to be a lot easier in their stages and boss fight even than the next 3 or the 2 or 3 after that. Now here we have the next major mechanic for King Knight stage, these books. Whenever you attack them, they cause platforms to appear that will fade after a certain amount of time. I believe the amount of time that they stay on screen is consistent. It's always the exact same amount of time, and even then they warn you when they're about to fade because a noticeable ringing will start appearing in the background. But as long as you keep a good pace with platforming, pausing only for like a second or two, they're seldom dangerous. But they are honestly probably still the hardest mechanic in the stage. That I recall dying there more times than any other place in the level on my first playthrough. Also, be careful. That's a bomb. Bombs hurt. I forget how much damage they do because I haven't been hit by one in a while. From memory, at least I don't think I got hit by one this playthrough. But I'm willing to bet it's the usual half a unit of health. Because it's only really in New Game Plus where you start seeing a lot of things hit for a full unit of health. Either way, we're coming up on the boss fight, and I almost went into a weakness, but bosses don't exactly have weaknesses in this game. An interloper is in our midst. Begone from our throne room, knave. I'm no more an intruder than you. You aren't even a real king. Oh, but you're mistaken. The enchantress saw me for my fabulously regal self, and now all bow before me. You're not but a decadent dandy. Prepare to taste justice. Shovel justice. Silence! Before I get into the boss fight itself, I should note that every boss in this game has a unique boss theme, and they're all fantastic. Jake Kaufman, dear God, man. Alright, now, King Knight only has really 3 major attacks. He can dash across the room in sort of a 0x style just to cause a standard slash attack. He'll jump all over the place, and occasionally just do a stomp attack that'll paralyze you if you're not careful. And around half health, he'll start summoning trumpets to rain confetti upon you, which does damage. With that said, he's still one of the first bosses you can take on, and honestly probably the easiest boss in the game period beyond that, barring Black Knight and the Plains. So he shouldn't give you much trouble on your first playthrough anyway. And the Scepter, the Flame Wand rather, does really good at taking out his HP pretty quickly. And like I mentioned, between each stage you get a little respite where you take a rest. I guess because each level is supposed to take like a proper day? And, like I mentioned, last part, I recommend digging up your campfire for some extra gold between each level. 150, that's not much on its own, but between every level, that can build up. And notably, you do need to beat every single level before you can progress, because as you just saw, King Knight unlocked a lock on the map. Now, in between levels, very often, minor levels will spawn. These can be either enemy rushes of a certain level's aesthetic, that's good for getting some extra money, or an outright gemstone will spawn on the map, which is just a relatively simple section in order to go through and level's challenges again, so to speak, like a sort of an abridged version of the level's mechanics, in order to get some pretty quick money. They're nice, but they're relatively easy. Usually the hardest things outside the main levels are the little gemstone you see on the bottom right of the screen right now. With that said, continuing forward, the structure of this LP is going to be essentially do level, turn in music sheets, get any upgrades I can. Let's see here. Ooh, you found Waltz of the Troupple King. Upon my first recital, the Troupple King started flapping his fins and said, "I'm so happy I could spit." What happened next? I'd prefer not to talk about it. Now that I have this music sheet, I can perform it for you at any time. Just ask. Alright, with our current 8,700 gold, I'd say the best upgrades you could do at this point in the game moving forward are going to be focusing on your magic rather than your health. Because especially if you get the Chaos Sphere early on and start spamming it, you're going to go through your weapon energy pretty quickly, so having more is never not going to be a good thing, essentially. With that said, if you're more action-oriented or reckless, I'd recommend getting some more health. Really, it depends on your playstyle. I prefer to get the weapon energy more often than not, but trying to fight against the LP curse, I'd rather get the health overall. Oh yeah, that king is actually supposed to be the king of Pridemoor Keep. That's a little detail we get to see in King of Cards, because obviously, and you may have noticed this just based off the campaign selection screen last part, but the other 3 playable campaigns are active boss fights throughout the game. King Knight, in particular, being the protagonist of the final campaign that we got, the completed Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, King of Cards. And I'll get to that eventually. In fact, I think I'm going to tackle the campaigns in the order they were released. So technically speaking, the next Shovel Knight campaign you'll see me do is Plague of Shadows, followed by Spectre of Torment, so on and so forth. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3, we're heading after our next boss fight, Spectre Knight. See you guys then.